everybody. Feeling a bit tired this morning, but I'm working at 10 o'clock and I've got to get this cake finished, so I thought I'd film it and do a little tutorial. If you do have any questions after, obviously please contact me, and if you want to see any more of my cake tutorials, please subscribe.
I absolutely love making number cakes. I always bake my cake in a rectangle like this, then use pen and paper to make the template to the size and shape that I want, and then carve out the cake. You do get a bit of wastage, but I tend to keep my crumbs, blitz them and keep them for cake pop, so I don't actually waste. I also put my cake in the fridge or the freezer prior to carving. That makes it a lot easier. And when you freeze them, it doesn't affect the cake at all, and it makes it a bit easier because then you can make your cakes ahead of time. I just use a bit of buttercream to secure the cake to the board, and now I'm covering it with the cake with quite a thick layer of buttercream. This is the Crumb Coat. This stops any of the cake crumbs getting into the fondant. You need to get it quite smooth and completely covered, and then we pop that in the fridge for probably 20 to 30 minutes, and it'll start to form a crust. So it'll be still soft underneath, but it'll be firm to the touch. Colouring some fondant there. You only need a little bit of colour. This one was blue because the cake was for little boy Ethan, and that's what his mother wanted. If you are going to do a darker colour fondant, red or black for example, I would buy those. They're a lot easier than using the food colouring because they take a lot of colouring to get the right colour. Although you can get extra red and extra black, and those are a bit better. When I'm rolling out my fondant, I use corn flour and not icing sugar. And then I try and roll out a piece of fondant that's quite a bit bigger than the cake. So when you're trying to get in the corners of a cake like this, you can lift the fondant and push it towards the corner, and then it stops it tearing and ripping. In the corner on the left hand side of the number one, I did have a little bit of tearing, but I'll show you in a second that I make my own ribbons out of fondant. I have a tool for it, and then I use that to cover up the cake. Here now I'm just neatening up the edges. I've used a knife just to trim away all the excess and giving it a nice good smoothing over, and that smooths the buttercream underneath. Here now I'm making those ribbons. There's the tool, and I'll use these now, a little bit of edible glue around the side of the cake, and that forms a sort of edible ribbon. You can use material ribbon, and quite often I do use a diamante ribbon, which is really, really pretty, but obviously you have to tell people that has to be removed before they cut into the cake. I'm just making some spots now for the number one. I made these in a slightly darker colour blue, and I made them in 3 different sizes, stuck them on with a bit of edible glue, and then I neatened them up with a paintbrush. I then sprayed the cake with a little bit of silver lustre and a little bit of glitter. I always like to put a little bit of glitter on my cakes. Here now I'm using Tappits to get out some letters to spell out the name Ethan. Usually you'd have to use modelling paste or Mexican paste for the letters, but I do use fondant. I find if you put them straight on the cake board, you can get away with it just about. Here now I've made a little teddy bear just to go on the side. The camera angle's not the best. I have got a new tripod come in, so I might redo this tutorial if you want me to. Just let me know, and then I'll do it from a better angle. But I've just made a sort of egg shape for his body, then put a little darker circle for his tummy. I've made 2 little legs, shaped feet on the end, and then cut them and stuck them on, all with edible glue. And then I'm moving on to his arms. Similar sort of thing. It's a sausage shape, then cut into 2. You then take the little hand shape on the end, cut it on an angle, and then stick it onto the body. It looks quite complicated, but a teddy bear is actually one of the easier things to make out of fondant. And with fondant, it doesn't run out, so you could give it a couple of goes. If you've made a cake and you've got a bit left over, use that fondant and have a play about and see what you can make. I've got a stitching tool there just to go up his belly, and then I've put a cocktail stick inside to put the head on. Without the cocktail stick, you're going to struggle to get it to stick. And then I've put a little bit of edible glue on his face and put his nose on, and a bit more with the stitching tool. And then a little bit of edible glue on the neck, and then I've put the head on. Making eyes, you could use a bit of black fondant to make the eyes, but I've used a paintbrush with a little bit of black colouring. I didn't have any black fondant, so it's the same sort of effect. And then for his ears, I've cut out 2 little circles, one in the darker, one in the lighter, and then I'm putting them together. I'm just shaping it up with the cutter there to make sure it's sort of a round shape, and then cutting it in half, and then just sticking them on with edible glue. You can use a little bit of water for sticking things, but edible glue is about £2.50 a pot, and I think it's worth it. There's the cake all finished. If you have any questions, please get in touch.